This is the Dirty Lou Podcast.
I came to the city as a cyclone, and I loved it like a strike of lightning.
This week's guest, Linda Scott.
Like some pink champagne, they got poured into a paper cup.
My first introduction to the city council was because of cannabis. When Sensimilla had been opening up, I was part of the front of the house team, or the owners. So we'd go to a lot of those meetings because we didn't know whether or not it was going to be permissible to even operate a medical store where we were. So that was my first introduction too. Funny because that was a little over 3 years ago. You know that Dunkin' Donuts that's on Main Street now that moved? They were at that meeting.
Yeah, Norm was there. I was there with you.
That was 3 years ago, roughly.
Yeah.
Before that took shape, before everything. And it was amazing to me because the council was talking about Middle Lane, talking about how it was going to change all of the traffic patterns, or they were experts who were speaking on that and data to support it. It was an amazing,
it's a lot.
Briefly, while we were all waiting for the cannabis talk, that's what was going on.
Right.
So
I remember being there.
Yeah. Were you as a consultant to anyone?
Yes. So it was actually Keith Goslin at Medco and, oh my God, how did I forget his name?
Alex?
Alex.
Yep.
Alex, that called on me because they knew me to get some advice on how to approach a city council when they wanted to get an ordinance change and working with the planning department. Mm-hmm. They called me and asked if I had any advice to give them, and I have a ton of advice because I do know a lot about the process on every level of the city. So I helped them as much as I could, met with all of you, and then went to the city council meetings to help to ensure that you guys, when you were speaking to city council, you knew what you had to do. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead if you want.
What are some of the things that people would have? So your experience on the city council had been for how many?
I had no experience on the city council. My knowledge of the city council is the fact that I actually attended city council meetings prior to COVID on a regular basis, even before I was on the school committee, and that since COVID, I have actually watched via Zoom every city council meeting and every school committee meeting in the last almost 2 years.
I feel that's
because
important.
I'm I want to know what our community is doing. I'm very actively involved in making sure that our community is moving forward in a direction that's going to benefit my kids and my grandkids.
What were you spotting? Why have such an interest in knowing what was going on in the city level? I mean, I think we all have our own personal, but for me personally,
this has been something that I have been actively interested in since early childhood, literally. I mean, I used to drag my sister and my mother to volunteer at different events. I used to volunteer at the library when I was 12 years old. When I was 13 and old enough, I became a candy striper at Central Maine General Hospital, CMG.
Let's bring it back, Linda.
Okay.
You are born and raised in Lewiston?
Born and raised in Lewiston.
Whereabouts?
So like how old am I?
No.
I'm just kidding. I will tell you, I don't mind. I was born in 1968.
What neighborhood you grow up in?
So, well, that's a total different story in and of itself because my parents got divorced when we were very young. And so we actually lived in several neighborhoods throughout the city. And
all in Lewiston?
All in Lewiston. I lived for a short period of time in Auburn. We lived directly across the river at the Roque Block. We lived in a section of the Roque Block
Auburn,
before it was, yes.
Just
I
kidding.
know.
Check against you. No,
I know.
Just kidding.
But, I had a paper out in Auburn when I lived in Auburn. I had a paper out in Lewiston on Bartlett Street. I used to deliver the morning paper, 172 papers on Bartlett Street, when there were apartment buildings lining that street. And my route was literally from Walnut Street to the bottom of Bartlett Hill. That short little piece of area, 172 customers.
Back when the papers, everybody had the paper.
Everybody had the paper, and we had a morning and an evening paper.
Booming. The Sunday edition.
Yes.
That was the Sun Times or the Lewiston Sun?
No, it was the Evening Journal, and it was the Morning Sun.
Okay.
Yeah. And so as far as living in Lewiston, I mean, I've literally lived everywhere. We lived at Pleasant View Acres for a short period of time. I lived on Webster Street. I lived on Ash Street. I lived on Central Avenue. I lived on Pierce Street. I lived on Pine Street. I mean, you name it, I've probably lived there, which is why I've always felt that Lewiston is a walkable city. It is a small town with a big vibe sometimes, right? Because you can literally walk anywhere in this community and you're getting there. And it's in a short period of time. It's really not that far.
I wish it was advertised more of as a walkable city.
So do
you know,
I.
I think it's too much focus on vehicles, and I get it. Buses are important too.
Yes.
But I think it could be advertised more as a walkable city, and that would be so
Absolutely.
beneficial.
So I lived in Lewiston my whole life. For a short period of time, back in the early 90s, my husband and I, we moved to Portland for 7 years. And the reason we moved to Portland was because we had a young child. My husband and I have been married for 34 years. We got married very young. We were both 19 years old. And we wanted to see our children grow up with more diversity and more in a city that had more of a worldview than what I grew up with here in Lewiston. I love this community. I've always loved this community and everybody that's lived here. But we wanted and we knew that the future of our world was a world that was much more diverse than what I grew up with in the city of Lewiston.
And
So-
years ago, diversity was
There
you know,
really
it was
wasn't.
basically, are you French or are you Irish?
Correct.
That would have
Yes.
been late 80s, early 90s, right?
That was back in the very early 90s, yeah. So we moved to Portland. We lived there for 7 years. And in the time that we lived there, I homeschooled my children, and I actually ran with another woman a large homeschooling group out of Portland with 70 families involved. And that's really when I started getting involved in sort of politics and different things like that, because I was looking at what the state policy was on homeschooling and what children that were homeschooled could access from their public schools, because I always felt that even though you were homeschooling as a taxpayer, your children should be able to benefit from everything that the public school has. So I wanted curriculum for my child. I wanted my daughter to be in band if she wanted to, but still be able to homeschool. So I worked actively at that time on legislation in Augusta to really bring up the homeschool program here in the state of Maine. Also at the same time, we had a very severe tragedy in our family back in the early 90s. And my niece, who was only 22 months old, was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
That happened around here?
That happened here. It happened
Okay.
in Auburn.
Okay.
And it became a national story because it was very, very bad.
This is what I'm pretty
It's
sure
not what you're thinking. It's not the one story in Auburn, but there was another one after that was just as horrific. Like I said, she was 22 months old, and she was assaulted, and she died as a result of the assault.
Oh my gosh.
We lived in Portland at the time, and it's something that I would never wish anybody to have to go through. Now, when we had to go through the whole process of a trial, is when I learned a whole heck of a lot about what happens in the state of Maine to kids that are killed under the age of 5. The vast majority of them under the age of 5, it is as a result of somebody that they know in their family. Mm-hmm. They're abused or hurt by somebody that's very close to their family. And many times prior to the work that I got done, which I'll speak about in a second, anybody that got convicted of doing something like a horrific crime to a child under the age of 5, they really literally got hardly any sentence whatsoever. At the time when I was researching this, the manslaughter mandate in the state of Maine, the judge could put anybody from 0 to 30 years. Start at 0. The statistics showed that the vast majority of those that got convicted spent less than 5 years in jail for a child that was under the age of 5. So that child wasn't even really, if they were killed at a very young age, wouldn't have even been in school yet by the time that person got out of jail for doing what they did.
How come there was that an allowance?
I don't know. And at
the
the time, I really don't know the logistics of all of that or what. I think there was just a lot more leeway for judges to make a decision. You know, somebody had, a good past, or it was a mistake, felt it was a mistake, like a shaken baby syndrome, or, sometimes the parents didn't do what, they a little frustrated and maybe did something that they hadn't really intended to, and it resulted in the death
So
of
the
the child.
leniency was
So
in
there was
place
some
for those
leniency
purposes.
there, and also the fact that it happened to, again, it was from family members that some of these things would happen. And there are many cases that I could state, but I won't because they're quite horrific. But in our particular case, when we went to trial and we went through the whole horrific ordeal of a trial, in the end, the person that did this to my niece got 3 years, 7 months, and 17 days in jail. And I literally lost my mind because I said, because I'm a very outspoken, strong person, and I've always been an advocate for children. especially once I had my own. And I had already been working in advocacy with Maine Children's Alliance down in Portland, and I had been working on legislation for homeschooling, and I was like, this is not going to happen. I have to do something about this.
Was there in the defense? Was there something citing accidental cause?
Yes.
Okay.
They tried to say that it was accidental cause. I would prefer not to go into the details because they are quite horrific.
Sure.
But yes, his defense lawyer tried to say that maybe she fell off her bike and other things happened that caused some of the bruising that was the result. But there were other things that pointed in a different direction.
All right. So that could have weighed in the judge's decision.
Yes, it could
like you said.
have.
Okay.
So at the time, I actually heard about another woman in Old Orchard Beach whose son had passed from shaken baby syndrome. I read an article in the paper, and she had spoke about how she wanted to do something about this and how this was happening, because she had just finished going through trial as well, and it was a very light sentence as well for her. And so I reached out to her, and I said, let's do this. And we literally worked for 3 years, and we got the law changed in the state of Maine via petition, writing the law ourselves, petitioning every legislator, everybody that we could think of in the state of Maine, to make sure that anybody that was convicted of manslaughter for a child under the age of 5, who we felt had no recourse or anybody to go to, they're not going to school, they can't report abuse or sexual assault to a teacher or somebody else, right? It's usually a family member. We got the law changed so that it was a mandatory 15 years, no matter what. And then if there was, they had good time and stuff like that, they could get out. But that there was an actual consequence to hurting a child. And it wasn't just nothing.
You had to do a lot. You had to do a lot of the hands-on the labor.
Everything. I helped write the piece of legislation. I testified in Augusta for it, everything.
I feel like, for a lot of people, when they want to see changes take place, I feel like they think that maybe just getting loud is the best thing or the best way they can make changes. They really have work
there is work to be done. Yes, you have to talk to other people. You can't just go to a city council meeting and say, I want this to be done. You're much more effective, or even a state anything that you want to really see a change on, you're much more effective in getting information, making sure that you know your sources, you know the statistics, you know what's happening, and you're talking to the people that they want to see that change happening too. And when you do that work, then that's when you get real effectual change in a community, in a state, whatever.
You propose this to a lot of people at state level as well as city level?
Yes. I was in Portland at the time, though, not here.
Sure. And for them, it was probably the first time they understood or were aware that this was
I think that once we gathered all our statistics and we started stating all of the incidences that have happened, like babies being tied up with duct tape, babies having a sock put in their mouth to stop them from crying, shaken baby. I mean, the stories were unbelievable. When I started gathering the information, I literally was overwhelmed that this had all happened, because we don't hear it. We don't think about it. We see it on the news. We feel that there's a huge tragedy, but until you're actually affected by it and you actually look at what's happening, it's unbelievable how bad it was, and how bad it still is in some things.
How do you maintain your drive and keep your spirits up? I mean, you go into it driven, wanting to do this for a reason, and you kind of open a can of worms, and you actually see the scope of how bad child abuse was at the time. And I mean, I feel like that would just kind of bog me down if I was on a mission.
It does, but I also have babies, right? I have 3 children. I now have 4 grandchildren. We also have a young man in our life that, when he was 13 years old, when we moved back to Lewiston, was my children's first experience in public school, particularly my oldest daughter, Bailey. She had never been to public school before, and she started at the middle school. And she wanted to invite everybody back to our house. She couldn't understand why everybody at the Lewiston Middle School wasn't like her. This was a totally new experience to her. And she brought home this young man into our lives, and almost immediately he started calling Steve and I mom and dad. And he is now 30 years old, and he is our son. He calls us mom and dad. It's never been officially adopted. His mom died at a very young age from cancer, and he glommed onto our family, and now he is officially a Scot without any official paperwork. Right. And he is our son too. So I do tell people a lot of times that I have 4 kids, because Kevin is my son just as much as Bailey, Barrett, and Beerson are my children by nature.
I think I remember going into a meeting with the city council and talking to, and I forget the representative's name, most recently on the board, he's just stepping down,
Majerus Collins.
Gentleman,
We're talking
more conservative viewpoints is the way it was explained to me, but maybe we'll edit this out for a split second, but
Yeah.
he's got red hair.
Nate Libby?
Nate Libby.
Nate Libby is a Democrat.
Democrat.
Yes, he is.
He's stepping down.
He was a city councilor, and he was a state legislator, and he's recently been serving as our senator for the state of Maine.
Oh, he will be.
He has been.
He has
already
been.
has been. Yes.
He struck me as maybe early 30s, mid 30s.
He is. Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And I believe he's working at Community Concepts now. Nate is an amazing person.
That's what I wanted to say. Is I remember speaking to him for a little bit, and I said, so, over at Geiger.
Yep.
Because our children, my child and his children, are roughly of the same age, and we ended up having a pickup at the same time. And you see somebody often enough, you start making conversation more.
Absolutely.
And then I had seen him on said city council meetings about the cannabis industry when it was here in
Yeah.
Lewiston when they were trying to establish. And I said, how come you got on the city council board? What were your reasons? What were your motives? And he said, because sometimes you have to take a path to create a change within your own community. And so it started where I made this proposal to the city council, and I needed to research. I needed to understand more about what was going on. Mm-hmm. And then I shared it with them, and actions started to take place. And he realized that there's a lot of strength and a lot of empowerment for people if there's, if you're going to put something together to right a wrong or perceived wrong, or however it is, that
Right.
you can go much further.
Yes.
If you want to take part in your
You can
city
accomplish
government or
things.
city entities,
Absolutely.
committees.
Absolutely.
You felt that way for quite a while.
Absolutely. For a very
Your
long
whole life.
time. Yeah, pretty much for my whole life. So this is so corny, but I take it back to a Brady Bunch episode, literally, where there was this whole episode about how you can't fight City Hall, and the family got together, and I remember Carol Brady was like, we're going to fight City Hall. And it's always been a thing for me that I always thought that if you're really committed to something and you really want to make a change, you can make that change.
And you found it to be true.
I found it to be absolutely true. So
Not just with City Hall, but I mean,
with everything that I do
in life.
in my
yes.
life, everything that I do, when I make a decision to do something, I give it 110%, and I know that I can make an effective change in whatever I want to do. It's probably why I've had so many different careers. I just, I don't call it bouncing around. I call it moving to the next level of my life, of where I'm learning more and I'm doing something different. So when we moved back to Lewiston, we
Now, so you moved back to Lewiston. Your daughter started in middle school, right?
yeah, she started in middle school, and I also had my second child who was also born. She was young. She wasn't old enough to go to kindergarten just yet. And at that time, we tried to homeschool here in Lewiston, but it was a completely different environment than in Portland. In Portland, people homeschool because for every reason. It could be a religious reason. It could be, it was secular. It didn't matter. People just wanted to some people, there was a lot more people that were into that homeschooling. Mm-hmm. You had the very naturalist kind of people that wanted to live like a natural life and they wanted to homeschool their kids. You had others that did it for a very religious reason. In Lewiston, there wasn't a lot of that happening. And I tried to, at the very beginning, see if I could do something here. But then I had to go to work because my husband lost his job. And I had to go, we couldn't afford for him to be on, we had a family now, right? So I had to go back to work, and so I couldn't homeschool anymore. For us, homeschooling was a full-time job for me. When you do that, you're committed, in my opinion. It's not, you just don't give the kids a book, right? I made sure that my kids were actively involved in anything they wanted. My daughter went to Pelletier's karate because she wanted to do karate. That was one of her social skills for us, right? I did all of these different things, but I had to, by choice, go back to work and do that. So my kids had to go back to public school.
You need a few people who are involved if you're going to do homeschooling, don't you?
I think it's really important because I think you need that social interaction. I think you need families that are willing to have kids get together and learn different things. And it's not just like they can do science and math together, but also put on a play together, write it together. Same things you would do in a school, they can do in a homeschool environment, I believe. We've done it. I know it.
Brought to you by the Dirty Lou Podcast. Comedy Night at the Dirty Lou Studios. Saturday, October 2nd, 2021. Our guest from Season 1, Episode 2 of the Dirty Lou podcast, comedian Ben Roberts. The hilarious Mike Gray. The irascible Jake Jacobson. The amusing Sarah Poulin. Funny man Joe Flynn. Life of the party Marcus Cardona. And the ringmaster himself, Mark Turcott. Saturday, October 2nd, 2021, from 7 to 9:30 p.m. at the Dirty Lou Studios at 22 Park Street, Lewiston, Maine. Ticket price is $15 pre-ordered, $20 at the door.
So when my kids had to go to public school, I became actively involved in the schools because these are my children, and I was doing it already in their homeschooling life. So I became almost literally within months the PTO president of Pettingill School, because that's where my daughter Barrett was going to be going kindergarten. Bailey was older and in the middle school.
That had to be towards the end of Pettingill, right?
Yes, it was. And I did that for several years, and then I actually, because I was the PTO president of Pettingill School, was the first time that I was on a building committee for the new school, and that was for Geiger School. So I got asked to be on that by, I believe at the time it was the sitting city councilor at the time, but I can't quite remember who had asked me. But of course I said yes, because generally when somebody says, do you want to do something and change something in Lewiston, my first response is, actually, my only response is yes. I'll be honest with you, I have a very hard time saying no.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't picture you just being like, nah.
No, it never happens. So I actually was actively involved in the building of Geiger Elementary School. And towards the end of that, there was, at the time, I remember there was an article that came out in the paper, I think it was in 2010, and it said that there was nobody running for school committee in Ward 1, which is the ward I live in.
Can you real quick, Linda, can you give us a brief description of where Ward 1 is?
So Ward 1 is predominantly Main Street in Lewiston. It's between College Street and Main Street in Lewiston, from Central Maine Medical Center all the way up to Pelletier's Karate at the very end, right to the green line.
So between
Yeah.
Main Street and the river.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a little bit on the other side.
And a little on the other side, because it's College Street. And it's the whole community and neighborhood between College Street and Main Street, going all the way up to Mullison Way.
Where I live.
Right.
Highly residential.
Yes.
Highly residential.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
We've got
I mean, you
River
have that
Valley
main
there.
strip,
We've got
you have-
Sunnyside Park, Sunnyside Park neighborhood, which is, River Street, Summer Street, that area.
I personally grew up in Sunnyside neighborhood. 30 years of my life I lived there, and I still live in Ward 1. I'm just a few blocks up the street in the Pettingill Park neighborhood now.
Which is where I live as well.
Yes, well, you and I are neighbors.
Yeah.
And I've been in this ward my entire life.
Yeah. I love it. It's great. I mean, like I said, I lived all over the place. I probably could count, not kidding, from birth to the time I was 25, I lived in 18 different places in the city of Lewiston and Auburn. We just moved a lot. That's the way it was.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But now we've lived where we live now, my husband and I, Steve, we've lived here for 21 years. We've lived on Pettingill Street. Mm-hmm. And I absolutely adore the neighborhood. So
Yeah, it is. It's a great neighborhood.
it's amazing.
It's a great area
It's
out
a
there.
great neighborhood. It really is.
But having exposure to actually living in different areas. So I think when I was younger, and maybe my teens and early 20s, I lived in different parts of Lewiston. But it was like Holland Street, Ralph Ave.
Yep.
It wasn't so much in the downtown area to speak of. Say from like where Five Corners is,
Yep.
where the middle school, kind of that connection inward towards the river, towards the river road
Right.
end of things. I've never really lived in that. It's very different.
My sister and I, we consider that
Different
part of our
needs.
neighborhood, and that's to change the subject just slightly. But when we were kids, my sister and I, after school, because my mother was the second female stockbroker in the state of Maine, which is an amazing accomplishment,
that.
right?
Yeah.
And she had an office down on Park Street at the County 5 building over here on the corner of Park and Ash Street.
Yep.
And so after school, my sister and I would frequently, almost on a daily basis, walk down Pine Street and go to the library, and we'd hang out at Lewiston Library. We lived downtown, literally. We would go downtown Lisbon Street and go to some of the little shops. Kresge's was still there back, I'm aging myself again,
And
back in the day.
When you say downtown, what's downtown for you?
Downtown for me is Lisbon Street, Lincoln Street, Canal Street. It's, you know what I mean? Park Street. This is
How far
our
does
downtown.
it continue up?
Continue
Or
up our
continue
downtown?
away from, say, Lisbon Street, heading towards, because again, like we start getting into, say, Bartlett, where it goes a little bit more parallel.
I never
Do we
considered
consider
Bartlett
that?
Street or the Tree Streets downtown. I consider that its own neighborhood.
Its
For
own
me,
neighborhood.
it's always been, that is where
like
my
the
family
Sunnyside
grew up.
Park neighborhood, like the
Yes.
Pettingill Park.
How's it
neighborhood.
identified differently
I
for
think
you guys?
We touched on this, or you guys touched on it in the Mike Dostie episode.
Yeah, we did a little bit.
Like, I think a lot of people, when they think downtown, they're including the Tree Street neighborhoods.
And I really don't consider that a downtown. I mean, in my mind, I could be wrong, but I consider downtown as our business district, our
Yes.
district where we have restaurants.
Maybe it's that
and-
distinction, business district.
Yeah.
That really kind of solidifies it for
Yeah.
me, I suppose.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because I really consider, the Tree Streets to me is a neighborhood. I mean, that was where my family was when I was a child. That's where, all of our families, they lived almost in the same area, and it was in that area, Horton Street, Cedar Street. That's where the whole French community kind of lived. We grew up in that area, So, yeah.
my parents my mom grew up on, it would have been one of the, how come I'm blanking out on it? Oxford?
Oxford Street?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it was highly Franco-American
Very Franco-American.
populations.
Yep.
There was a time, and it's more recently now, I'd say the last 25 to 30 years, where Lewiston did lack a lot of diversity, culturally, ethnically. And it's still been a slow process, although it's been gradual enough where you're seeing signs of, this multiculturalism that is taking hold.
Isn't it amazing?
It is. It's been really cool.
Absolutely amazing.
It almost seems like the influx of immigrants happened when the assimilation of the Irish and French everything was settled. It was
Kinda,
one.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was one. There wasn't a lot of that,
because when I was
Tribalism?
a child,
Yeah,
there
there
still
wasn't-
was that,
when
right?
you- but-
there were derogatory names. I heard
Yes.
derogatory
Oh, for
names
sure.
towards
Yes.
myself because I was
Yes.
French, and my
Oh,
family
really?
was French. Oh, absolutely.
I don't think I felt
And-
like that.
And you're not smart
don't think
because
I
you're
had it.
French. There was a lot of different things that were said. Yes.
I think things, as far as that go, had kind of slowed down and settled, and people got really comfortable with each other. And then we had the influx of the immigrants.
Yeah, which is scary to everybody, right? People
Of course
think
it
it's
was.
safe because it's
Of
new.
course it was.
Right?
Yeah.
But
It
look
was.
what it's actually done. I've got to be honest with you. If we hadn't had the influx of immigrants into our community, I probably wouldn't have two of my best friends that I have in my life.
Oh, really?
Right?
Yeah.
So Zamzam Mohammed is my best friend. She calls me her sister. I call her my sister. We're rainbow sisters. That's what we call each other. Actually, Bob McDonald named us that, the former mayor, because we used to sit together watching city council meetings in the audience, and he called, yes. But Zamzam is family to me, and there are others that are family to me. When my husband got sick 5 years ago, got severely ill, the Somali community, who I had known and had been, getting to know even more, completely embraced my family and were there with food and to help us. And I was blown away by the generosity and the love.
The actual community aspect of the Somali community. They do things
It's
together,
phenomenal.
and they come
Yes.
together for others. And yeah, it is
It's phenomenal, yes. And it's something that we, as a city of Lewiston,
could learn from
need
it.
to learn from
Yeah.
and embrace and recognize, because there is actually, as much as I've seen, little difference between a French family in the 1960s and the closeness of that family with the aunts and the uncles and the cousins always together on a regular basis, like every weekend, than what we see in the Somali community today, where their families are very close-knit and they are there for each other. I think it's an amazing thing.
This is a different thing, but you're right, though. The Franco-American family was really, really strong at one time as well, though.
was.
And it still is.
Yes.
In a lot of different ways,
Very
but not
religious.
quite the mirror, not quite the image or the same dynamic as what you've encountered in the Somali community now.
I think that has a lot to do with cultural differences, right? The French were culturally different than a lot of the people that lived here when they first came in. They had a different language. They had a
But
different
my fear is
religion.
it's time.
Oh, absolutely.
Time
It's-
is what's changed the Franco-American. The
Yes.
American way of
Yes.
living has changed the Franco-American, not just Franco-American, whatever
Whoever,
groups
correct.
you are. Is it I can see it as a threat to cultures that have come into different types of
Absolutely.
cultures that come into America, because we've somewhat lost it.
We have. And so what's the difference from my meme speaking French to me every day and hardly speaking English to a Somali grandmother who just speaks Somali, but her grandkids are speaking American. They're going to American schools, right? They're speaking
Same.
English. It's the same thing.
It is.
Kinda goes in circles, doesn't it?
Of course it does. And it is a circular thing. And they want to keep their culture. They want to make sure that their grandchildren remember the culture that they grew up with and they've lived their whole lives and their ancestors lived, right? Just like my meme did.
I feel like the Somali community is going, I'm hoping they do a good job of maintaining the strong Somali culture and not letting that fade as
Oh, I
time goes
absolutely
by.
agree.
Because I know that my friends' parents and whatnot, they were the generation that, they didn't continue the French speaking. I mean, they could
Right.
all speak it a little bit, but they weren't speaking it every day.
That's
They
me
weren't
too.
out in public doing that. So you know what I'm talking about. I'm really hoping that the Somali community holds on to it, keeps all those kids active, keeps them all speaking the language, like keeps some of those roots.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're becoming Americanized too, and they're
Well, that's the way it goes, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
which I think it can be good. But
Absolutely.
you have to. I think it's a great thing, but I think you also have to be conscious of maintaining the culture
Yeah.
and keeping that. And I feel like the Somali community is going to do a good job with that.
So we've seen in past generations a lot more of the threats, or the threat to the family dynamic, to this passing on of traditions and stuff. Have we learned anything? Have we found anything that we could say, like, these are the things that work
I
in
don't know.
preservation?
I'd like to think
while
so.
still having this integration of cultures.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like you have to, in order to protect it, you almost have to separate it.
Of course, because you want to keep those traditions, right?
And
You
yet,
don't
if you
want the
keep it
kids to lose
separate,
it.
then you're kind of like ostracizing
Right.
a group of people too.
And I think it's up to everybody to have an open mind and to be welcoming.
Well, that's what I think too, and I think it's up to every individual families and the cultures to progress or move in the direction that they're most comfortable with. And the important thing for a community or a city itself is to recognize that they are going through some of those changes, right? This is a new environment for them. We should absolutely be thankful that they chose to live here,
Yep.
for one thing,
Yep.
right? And bring up our community in a totally different way than any of us had ever experienced before, but also give them the opportunity to acclimate and assimilate if they want to,
Yes,
right? We
if
don't
they want to.
assume that they're going to assimilate, and we don't force assimilation. We recognize that they're our neighbors, they're new people that live here, and isn't that great? And that is it.
Yes.
And they're part of us.
Yes.
That's all.
And, if they have a question about something, give them some advisement. If they're in a pickle where, their daughter wants to have a birthday party, but that's
Right.
not something they really do in Somali culture, but they want to meet in the middle and they want to recognize they're raising this American child with these Somali roots. And I know for a lot of my friends and stuff, this is what they're going through, is they're
Yeah.
raising kids here, and their kids want to have a dog, they want to have a cat, and there
Right.
needs to be that understanding. And
Absolutely.
they really try and meet in the middle, but respect the culture that they come from. I think us as people living with this community is to understand why they feel the way they do, and maybe help them meet their children in the middle and meet that goal so their kids can be happy and
Encourage them to be part of our community.
yeah,
Right,
but maintain
right.
It's not going
those
to come
traditions.
from people who are in positions of authority or positions of
For
legislative.
me personally, I mean, as somebody that's run for office before and worked on several different campaigns, I would absolutely love to work on a campaign to support more Somali or any other immigrants being part of our school committee, our city council, being on the planning board, being on the finance committee. You know what I mean? Having them actually have a voice in doing those things and making decisions that are happening in the city that they live in.
So with you being a candidate for the city council, Linda, like how do you expect, what do you expect to come into play with your role if you're elected and the Somali community or the immigrant community for that matter?
Or any community.
Yes.
Me personally, everybody that lives in Ward 1 is my neighbor. It doesn't matter. You're my neighbor. If you have something to say, you have a question to ask, you come talk to me. If I don't know the answer, I'm not afraid to admit that I don't know the answer. You're not going to get any BS from me. I'll find the answer. And if I can't, I'll be honest about it and say I can't. There's no bullshit when it comes to Linda. I do what I do. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
I swore.
Please do.
We'll add one of those.
I just realized that. I was like, oh.
You'll be like, there's no beep.
Okay.
We'll add one of those. We'll
Okay.
make it professional.
It might be timed right. It might not be.
Yeah.
We'll still let you get away with
We'll
it.
let people know what word it is, but we'll edit it up.
Okay.
Well, what?
But you know, that's what I want people to recognize. I want people to see. I want a city councilor that's going to recognize that everybody that lives in their wards needs a voice on that city council speaking for them.
Sure.
Right? So there's an old tradition in Lewiston many years ago. So I'm a sort of a pretend play history buff of the city of Lewiston. I love the history of the city. And we used to have city councilors would have ward meetings on a regular basis, whether it was like a quarterly or a monthly, whatever they felt was need, but they actually met with their constituents in their ward and talked to them specifically about, hey, how's that crosswalk working out on Main Street? What do we need over here on this street? We need to bring that back. We need to have everybody really having a voice and being heard, and not just somebody sitting in that position because, oh, maybe I'm going to be a state legislator someday, or I'm going to do this. I don't want any of that. I want to do it because I want a voice on that city council that's going to speak for Ward 1. And I want somebody that's willing to take the calls, take the criticism, take the praise, whatever it is, but get the answers and get the work done.
Well, can I just I want to kind of clarify a little bit. For a person who's not, they have a new family. They just settled in and got a new house. They're living in Ward 1. What should they go to you, Linda? Like, what kind of concerns should people in Ward 1 come to you for? What should I be out there telling you so you can go to work?
I think they would come to me for anything. I mean, I think that the city councilor should be the resource to point people into the direction if they need help or assistance in any way. But also, we've got a street light out on our light. It's dark every night and we see a car driving by. Can you help me with that? Absolutely. I'm going to call the police and I'm going to say what's going on. I'm not afraid to ask.
So even if it's like one of those things where it's like, somebody should get on that. Who do I
Who
go
do we
to?
call? Call your city councilor. I mean, who else do we have to answer these questions, right? Your city councilor should know everything that's going on in their ward. They should know about the funding that we have available in our community. Let's do a quick thing. Community grant block funding, okay? They call it CDBG funding here in the city of Lewiston.
Okay.
It is federal funding that is given to the community because of our status as being a poor community. We have 50% renters here versus 50% homeowners.
Does that help?
Literally
Does that
50% of the people that
constitute
live here.
a poverty level?
Yes, and it's
Okay.
part of the poverty level. And there are certain tracts in our city that meet the standards for this money from the federal government, okay? And one of those tracts, they're census tracts, because they go by the census, how many people live there, what's the poverty level, all sorts of different things that they look at. One of those tracts is the Sunnyside Park neighborhood. It's called Tract 202. You never see funding for Tract 202. We have these conversations when this money comes in, and they talk about tree streets need this, and I think it's great that the tree streets is getting, because we have some serious issues that need to be addressed there.
When I was growing up, I lived in the Sunnyside Park neighborhood, and a lot of I'm not trying to put my friends on the spot, but I know that a lot of my friends considered Sunnyside Park right there with the Tree Street neighborhoods.
Right.
Like same level, downtown, like, whoa, you live in Sunnyside Park neighborhood.
Well, it's a working class neighborhood, really. It is.
sure.
It's a blue collar working class neighborhood with so much potential. I mean, think about it. This is on the river. To me, that's like prime real estate. This is
Yes.
a unbelievable area that we could actually build and grow and make some good things happen. Like, how about like a tasting room or a little brewery down
Oh
there?
yeah,
an
for
old
sure.
building,
Right near the
It's-
river, right on the
Hello?
river.
It almost seems like a bit of a blank slate.
It
You have
is.
all these houses, but there's all this property down there, and there's all this,
Right.
room for business.
So people
room for
talk about that
housing.
and they say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we have that? But you need somebody that understands that we have this federal funding. We have this particular neighborhood that gets used in the statistics to get this money. But is there money going over there? Nope. happening.
So what is happening
So
with that money?
That money goes to different areas. So some goes to community concepts, some goes to help, some of the streets down here on Lisbon Street or on Tree Street.
So because it's not being used in the
because-
Sunnyside, it's being reallocated to different parts of the city.
I think we need a spokesman that's going to say, why aren't we having that money used over here?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'd like to do. I've brought it up already. I went to a city council meeting because they had it was maybe a month ago that they had the public hearing for the community grant block funding. And it talked about their goals and plan, because the planning department and they make a plan on how they're going to use this money and where it's going to be allocated. And they actually had additional money that came in because of the CARES Act and COVID. They had to find a way. They have to use this money because you can't just let federal money come in and waste.
I can
right?
pause you for a second. Yep. So the federal government allocated this money to the city of Lewiston.
Mm-hmm.
Then the city of Lewiston is going to take this money and allocate it to its different wards.
Correct. And what needs to be done.
Kind of equally or not
where it can be
necessarily,
used,
depending
right?
on which city councilor says, hey, I'd like to be able to use it for. No.
Nope. Not a city councilor.
How's that
So
division
that's where your planning and
City
code
and planning
yes, and those different departments and economic development department.
Okay.
They're the ones that look at that and where we can use that money and where it's best used in the community and that sort of thing. So when they had the public hearing for it, and I was looking at the plan, there was nothing listed for the Sunnyside Park neighborhood. And I said, well, why isn't there anything there when they're used as a statistic to get some of that funding? To me, well, they're not necessarily in as much need as other areas of the city. Well, yeah, that
Okay.
might be true.
All right.
Right? So
Sure.
we can understand that, but at the same time, why? And what can we do? And are we really looking at that neighborhood? Because in my personal opinion, that neighborhood needs.
I was going to
Here's an
say, how
example
many
of what
times
we
can you
could do.
how many times can you use that excuse? Well, they don't need it as much. You say that year after year after year after year.
So here's something that I think that we could use that for, and this is just an example of something I thought of. Community resource officer. Our community resource officers, we have two, right? So these are some of the people that will go and, when they're at like a homeless place where they see like there's issues with some of the homeless in the area, the community resource officers may be the ones that are called to go look at that and that sort of thing. We could use some of that money to maybe hire another community resource officer and help out with the homeless situation we have along the riverside and then in that area, right? Yeah. We have, that area has all sorts of different things happening, just like the rest of the city. There's a bicycle stolen here. This stuff happens all the time. But a police officer drives through that neighborhood at 10 o'clock in the morning and not at 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe when it's needed. So if we have somebody that's advocating for that and pointing that out to the police department, to our economic development department, maybe we can start getting some of that stuff taken care of, because now they're using some of that fund to hire the person to do that work. And that's just a quick little, I don't know the feasibility of that, but it's just kind of an example that I had in thinking about how could we use some of that funding. I think that would be a great way.
Priorities for you. If you're elected, to this ward, you're on the council, what are your priorities for the next period of time that you'll be there?
So I have several priorities. One of my main priorities is really doing something to help the homeless situation that is happening in the woods in the Sunnyside Park neighborhood.
We've been made aware of that.
We did a podcast with Jamie over at the store next door.
Yep.
And she talked about homeless teens. And
So the store
she
next
raised
door
some of the
and-
numbers.
yeah,
and
it's
to our
amazing.
awareness, and we haven't released that yet, but
It's a lot.
it blew my mind.
It's mind-blowing, yes.
And we hadn't got into adults. We hadn't talked about those who are
We only
18
talked about
and
teenagers.
older.
So,
right.
that's my neighborhood. I walk that gateway walkway all the time and that all back there. And I'm also very actively involved in doing cleanup in that neighborhood constantly, particularly on that walk and in that area, because it's a beautiful spot.
Love it.
And
If you've
I'm-
never been down to the Riverwalk, do yourself a favor on a beautiful day. Bring your
Absolutely.
dog and walk down there. Or take a bike.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or, just yourself. It's
But
awesome.
also the park, right? So there's Sunnyside Park right there that used to be, from what I've heard from neighbors that have lived there for years, this unbelievable park. They used to have a skating rink in the wintertime and all sorts of other things. And if you go to that park on a clear, beautiful day like today, at 6 o'clock at night after dinner, it is packed.
Slammed.
Every
Yeah.
single basketball hoop is being used. The courts are full. The swings are being used. There's
people out in the
parents and
field
kids
playing soccer.
everywhere. I think that the city could really take advantage of that and do something more for that community to have a nice, really nice upkept playground, right? And that field could be used as an alternative, maybe practice soccer field, maybe not an official soccer field, right, that you would play games on.
Sure.
But if it was maintained well enough, why couldn't the kids be able to use that? There are many kids that live in River Valley that are all over the Ward 1 that love playing soccer. We could have that right there. They wouldn't have to travel to another part of the community to go play. We'd have it right there, right? So those sorts of things I think that are really important. We need to focus on what is happening in these neighborhoods outside of the Tree Street. And again, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, but that tends to be the number one conversation that's happening. It's downtown Lewiston and the Tree Streets, right? Yep. And we need to focus on other areas. Crosswalks. So I'm an advocate.
I don't even feel like people use them anymore.
It's very
They
difficult.
should, but at the same time, there's not enough.
There's not enough.
Yeah.
So I
You have
walk
to walk.
everywhere.
You got to walk a block to some
Absolutely.
crosswalks, and
That's
then
true.
walk a block back to get where you wanted to go before.
So you think about Outer Main Street, right? So you go from Strawberry Avenue up to Martin's. Back there, we have River Valley, a huge community of families, right? They come across the railroad tracks. They go to Main Street because they want to go, because Main Street, if you look at the corridor of Main Street versus the other corridors like Sabata Street and Lisbon Street, Main Street's hopping. There is like no empty businesses there except for the old Cumberland Farms that got replaced by the new Cumberland Farms.
Oh, right.
Everything else is full. You don't have empty buildings like you see on Lisbon Street, an empty Rite Aid, an empty gas station. There is stuff happening there. And you have people in the neighborhood that want to go to Cumberland Farms. They want to go to Irving. They want to go to Ruper's. They want to go to Paris Farmers Union. They may want to go to Buddy T's or some of the restaurants, right? There's all sorts of things right there. And there is no crosswalk.
You have a crosswalk at Strawberry Ave on
That's
Main
it.
Street, and then you got nothing else.
Nothing. And get
There's no
this.
real crosswalk the rest of Main
On
Street beyond
top
there.
of
It's so
that-
funny you say it, Linda, because I walk that with my kids and my dog, and that's what I think is like, man, where are we going to cross?
There's no place to cross, right? And then on top of that, look at where the bus routes are. The bus pickups are all on one side of the street, all on the side of the street of Cumberland Farms. So the people that live in River Valley, if they can't catch a bus at River Valley, and we'll say they want to go to Cumberland Farms or the bank, and now they got to find a way to cross the street to get on the bus.
That adds to the jaywalking problem we have.
Absolutely. And
You
it's-
have to do it, or else you got to walk a block or two out of your way just to circle back to where
Now,
you are.
anybody that lives in Lewiston, tell me that people are not driving fast on Main Street, right? How are
It
you
has
crossing
a lot
that
of
street,
traffic.
right?
It does, and it's continuously busy. And it's
So-
only a two-laner.
Yes.
So the size of the road doesn't necessarily play well for, now you're asking them to expand out on
I'm
your
not
road.
necessarily talking about expanding the road, but we definitely can look at crosswalks, and a city councilor can definitely do that. So when we had the unfortunate accident a couple of years ago where one of our students at Lewiston Middle School was hit on Main Street and he passed away.
I remember that.
That was horrible. It was a horrific accident. And that was Jaden. And I was the chair of the Lewiston School Board at the time. And I remember having to speak about him in front of all the kids. And it was devastating. It was devastating. It was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see these kids. And it was because we didn't have a proper crosswalk for him to cross from Sunnyside neighborhood across Main Street
Now, where
to
it
go to the middle
happened,
school.
that is the crux of where kids walk from Sunnyside Park neighborhood to the Lewiston Middle School.
Which is at Fry Street.
They all cross
Oh, yeah,
at
okay,
Fry
I know what
Street,
you're talking.
and they
Sure.
never had an actual crosswalk there.
So one of the things that happened, and it wasn't me that started it, but I did help out on the project, was that Nate Libby and the former mayor and current state legislator, Kristen Cloutier, who was a city councilor at the time, worked on a pedestrian coalition. And we really got some work done talking to the Maine DOT and others to put together an actual definitive plan on where the city of Lewiston needs crosswalks so that we can make sure that our kids are safe going to school, pedestrians using our streets are safe crossing the streets, and getting education in our schools and education to pedestrians because, let's be honest, not all walkers are paying attention to where they're going. So this is not just on drivers, this is on walkers, bikers, drivers, everybody that's using our roads.
To clarify, there's a difference between a crosswalk and then a painted path in the street, right?
Correct.
Like we're talking a button you can press with some flashing lights that will show the traffic that
That's
you
right.
want to cross.
Because there was a painted piano pattern there before.
Faded away.
But when he was hit, it was a very rainy, dark morning. He wasn't
I remember
seen.
that day.
Now we have the flashing, triangular yield signs where you can
Yep.
push the button and it flashes so
yeah.
that people
If there's
know.
a crosswalk
Sure.
on Main Street, it needs to be in that style or no one will stop.
Absolutely, I agree.
I was so scared the morning that happened because
How
I had a
come?
nephew.
You knew already?
Because my nephew Damon and my niece Dylan
Yeah.
were in that neighborhood,
And
and I was like,
walking.
I was working nights at the time, and I was coming off my shift, and I saw like the rumblings of it on social media, and I remember just being like,
Yeah,
oh my God! I messaged like my mom. I'm like, is Damon and Dylan okay?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was so scary.
Yeah.
And it made me think, I'm like, that's where I crossed my whole life going to school. And it is such a dangerous spot. And the only thing we were ever given was a painted crosswalk.
Yeah.
And that's the only place you could cross for blocks
Right.
on Main Street. I mean, that's where everybody in that neighborhood would go. So I remember just my heart sinking, thinking about my family who lived in that neighborhood. And it's just kind of crazy to think that it's blowing my mind, Linda, because this is my ward I live in.
Right.
I walk up and down Main Street, and that's one of the things is like, where can we cross?
It's a horrible thing, and it's something that we really need to address more. And as a city councilor, that's absolutely something that I'm going to bring up and want to make sure that we get change. Because, again, like I said at the beginning, we are a walkable community, and we need to focus and make sure that everybody has access and comfortable access on using our roads.
Comfortable access to make this city a real walking city. I mean, it would do wonders.
I think so,
I
too.
would walk more.
Yeah, yeah.
I like to do all that stuff, but we don't even have sidewalks on most of our
Correct.
streets.
No, that's true.
And
Yeah, you're right.
crosswalks, I think that's a way bigger issue than what a lot of people realize, Linda.
I think so too. So, when I look at those things, and I look specifically at the things that are happening in my ward, I do think about River Valley. I walk around that area a lot too. And,
River Valley,
which is the old Tall Pines.
Used to be called, Tall
Tall
Pines,
Pines.
right.
So I'm not quite sure I believe that that's HUD-funded housing, but I can't guarantee that I'm knowing this correctly. Either way, whoever owns that property, the people that live there have a lot of family. It's a great neighborhood. Go take a look at the trash that's collecting at that trash receptacles and by the railroad tracks. It's horrific. Like, why isn't that being taken care of? I look at this and I think, this is a great little neighborhood. Why is there trash everywhere? Why isn't this being done?
You're talking about going down Strawberry Ave.
Yes.
And you're
Yes.
right. That end of Strawberry Ave, like that industrial aspect to it, just
What can we do more to make that look more enticing and better, right?
yeah.
What is there? We
because
can
you turn
do
the
things.
corner and you're like, oh,
Yes.
dog walking park, and then you're driving, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, little apartments everywhere, Sandcastle School. I'm like, this is a pretty sweet little area.
It is.
I bring my bike down there to get back on the
Right.
trail and whatnot, and I always tell myself, I'm like, oh,
Well, I walk there almost every day because I work at Sandcastle.
Yes.
So I walk from my house down there to
it's
work.
pleasant.
Yeah.
But that end of Strawberry Ave is rather ugly.
Yeah. And we need more work to be done there, but not just like those types of things like trash. I mean, I really think that I'll go to a neighborhood and pick up trash. I'll post on my Facebook and say, hey, I'm going to this neighborhood. Who wants to join me Saturday? Occasionally I get somebody, but I think it's a good way to just get out. I do it a lot, especially in my ward, because it gives me an opportunity to get out and talk to the people that live in my ward. And what do you want? What do you want to see happen? Another thing I think we really need to address is houses that are not being lived in or owned by out-of-state property owners that are run down, not being taken care of and maintained, and get so run down to the point that now we have to tear it down and we're losing a house instead of making sure that stays a viable option in our community. We have crap for housing in our community.
Is there a
This
lot
is
of that?
something-
Is there a lot of
There
that?
actually is. So there's even in our ward, in Ward 1, so there's 2 houses over by Bates College in the White Street, Elm Street neighborhood, specifically, that I've pointed out to the Planning and Code Department because there's mattresses sitting out there. You've got these beautiful houses all around, and you got this one house where there's mattresses that have been sitting out, and the neighbors are like, they've been out there for 3 years. 3 years. Like, what's going on? You know, the grass is this high, right? And we have code and ordinance to make sure. That's the kind of stuff that out-of-town people, when they want to move here or a business wants to come here, they want to see a city that's maintained, right? If the city
Interesting.
has an ordinance in place to make sure that our grass needs to be cut at a certain level, and they can give you a fine for not cutting yours, then why the heck is the grass at Sunnyside Park Field 18 inches high and the city hasn't mowed it yet? Right.
Is it because are we continuing to be underfunded or allocating our funds
Well, I think we need to look
incorrect
at that.
areas? Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Has there been a paper trail, so to speak, for where money does become allocated?
I think we need to look closer at it. So, you know, this is a difficult process through the budget season. As on a school committee, I worked through 6 budgets.
When do they normally happen?
They happen at the beginning of the year.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So-
not in a fiscal sense where
It is.
could
It's a fiscal
occur in
sense for
different
the- it's-
periods of the
No,
year.
it's the beginning of the year that
Always.
we go through budget season, both for the school committee and for city council, generally starting in like March, beginning of March, and then it goes on. And then the vote for school committee, their budget is usually in May.
Okay. That
So-
kind of aligns with what the state does.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that we're kind of, you know, making sure that we have what we need throughout the fiscal year, and it covers everything. This school committee budget, I got a reputation being on the school committee from the staff, the administration, as being oh God, we're doing budget season and here comes Linda. Because I would literally go through a legal pad. I would go with a highlighter and every line and a ruler and look at every single thing. I want to know where that money's going. Do we really need this? And can we put it in a more effective place? And as a city councilor, I will do no less. I want that budget to be looked at very closely and to make sure that we're using that money where it's best needed in our community and not always necessarily in the same place. $30 million grant that we just got for Tree Street, the neighborhood grant is an amazing thing. And we are really, really lucky as a community, which most people don't recognize, that we have people working in our economic development department that made that happen, and they're rock stars, and they don't get enough attention
fantastic.
to
Oh,
look
good
at
on
that,
them.
right?
Good on them.
And it is
Thank
a good
you.
thing. But we're doing that. How many times have we gotten grants and funding and different programs for specific areas in our community? Decades now, and it still really hasn't changed yet, right? We still have issues that we have to address. What are we doing? Why aren't we going back and like saying, we did this 6 years ago, and we made this plan, this comp plan, and we want to make sure that our streets look like this? Where's the looking at that and the accountability that we're actually doing that? So an example would be, like a city council, we make decisions, right? They usually make a plan. We did it on the school committee. At the beginning of the year, we have goals that we want to address as a city council.
The city council,
The city council does this. They make goals that they want to address each year, that they, you know, through budget season, we'll talk about it if we can address that, and through the whole year. Whether it's like the Equity and Diversity Committee that was started, they wanted to make sure that the city council was talking about equity and diversity in our community, particularly with what happened last year with the Black Lives Matter movement and some of the protests that we saw. This is an important issue that we need to discuss. It's not just a national issue. It happens right here, right? We have racial disparity right here. We have systemic racism right here in our own backyard. This is an important issue. But when we talk about doing an important issue like that, or we make a plan like the comp plan or the legacy Lewiston plan, which is like development plan, how we want our corners to look and new businesses to come in, when are we looking at that again and making sure that we're doing that work?
the follow-up.
Right? When are we holding ourselves accountable? Why don't we have, at the end of the year, the city council give themselves an evaluation?
Yeah.
What did we do this year?
Right,
What did we accomplish?
What goals did we
accomplish our
manage to
goals?
achieve?
Can we
Yeah.
do more? And have the community involved in that process, knowing and holding our city councilors and our administrative staff at City Hall accountable for the things they say they're going to do. We don't have that. I want to see that. I want to be held accountable. If I'm a city councilor and I'm going to do something, I want you, my ward constituent, to say, you didn't do that. Well, then I didn't do what I said I was going to do. And I think that that's extremely important. You don't go into this position because you want a name or a title. You go in this position because you want to see something done in our community, and that's what I want to do.
You have to be able to answer to your constituents in your area,
Absolutely.
in your neighborhood, and they're not necessarily. It's not that they're united or they're active. It's almost like their activity depends on how much it impacts them directly.
Correct.
And they feel like it's impacted
Correct.
them directly.
Correct.
So how do you build this awareness in a community? Whether like, should we be breaking it down even to a greater degree than wards? Should we be talking about neighborhoods in some way?
I think so.
Consolidating or unifying,
Yes.
even if they're just having minor discussions to some degree.
Well, we've already sort of done it just in this conversation. Ward 1 has Sunnyside Park neighborhood,
Right.
River Valley neighborhood, Pettingill Park neighborhood,
Right.
Right? I
Right.
mean, we've sort of have already done that. I think
Right.
naturally people do. So maybe there should be some actual formal steps to kind of.
Well, and which is hence why I want to bring back more of these, like a regular meeting for a city councilor with their people. You offer it you don't just say, okay, we're going to meet on a Tuesday at such and such church hall or whatever. Make it available to them. I'm going to be at Simona's Hot Dogs for Saturday afternoon. Come down and talk to me if you want to there. Make it another time. 4:00, I'm going to be at Dunkin' Donuts. What I'd like to do is really use the businesses that are in my ward so that the people see the great businesses we have in our ward already, and then invite them to come have a conversation with me. Let's talk,
You
not just through
remember,
computer or phone.
I know you both are going to remember this, but wouldn't it be awesome if we had like Gilly's Variety still existing down there? How cool would it be to go there and have one of these meetings like what you're talking
Absolutely.
about? And everyone can sit at the bar that was sitting
Yes.
there and like.
And just talk and talk and
Yes.
hear it because,
Yeah.
the reality is, so I'm sort of, and I will readily admit this, sort of a freak and somebody not really like other people. When
No,
it
you're
comes
motivated to do
I
this.
am.
You're
And
motivated.
Most people do not watch a city council meeting when they're not on the city council, especially through COVID when you have to zoom in. Right? I mean, this was a commitment that I made. I did it with the school committee too. I watch this because I am committed to this. Most people are not. People are busy. And like you said, they want something done when it immediately affects them or impacts them. I've got a pothole. My access just broke on my truck. Who's going to fix this on my street, right? Or something to that effect. My trash isn't getting picked up regularly or whatever the problem might be for the city. That's when people get involved. But how do we get them to be more involved? That was one of the biggest things I had on the school committee was I used to go to the meetings, there would be nobody there. Nobody
So you're
there.
speaking to an empty
There's
group where you're
nobody
trying to
sitting
convey
there,
these
right?
ideas.
How do we
how
get
do
people-
ideas get how are we going to share these ideas?
Yeah, so
how is
so
the
why
best,
don't we
what
bring
is the
school
best
committee
way?
meetings to the schools? So that parents can come on a PTO night and maybe we get a few more people, or how about we bring some of those people to, make it available so they could talk at an event or something like that and let people know that you're going to be there. Make yourself accessible. The only way we're going to make changes if we have conversations with everybody. Right? It cannot
The
come just
opinions
from
we want
one
to hear
way.
and the opinions we don't want to
Absolutely.
hear. It has to be both.
But you still have to hear all of them, right?
You do have to.
Right?
You
I
have
mean-
to because you need the diversity of information.
You don't want a city councilor that's sitting there and they're only going to listen because they're a Democrat, listen to Democrats, right? Or they're a Republican and they're huge Trump supporters and they're not listening to people that voted for Biden at all. That's crap. That's not going to get us anywhere in our community, right?
Right.
You want somebody that's going to say, okay, yeah, I'm not a Trump supporter. I didn't vote for him. You are. That's okay. You're my neighbor. What can I do for you in the city of Lewiston? This is not national politics. This is what we're doing in our neighborhood. We're neighbors.
Where
We
it
go to-
matters.
what matters right here?
Yep.
We go to church together. We go to the grocery store together. Our kids go to school together. What are we doing for here? Not all of that out there. That out there is never going to end. We're polarized now as a country, right?
Yep.
We're not going to change any of the big stuff until we change the stuff right here.
Well, Linda, let me mention this because this has been something I've been seeing in the news lately. City council meetings, school meetings, they really have become pretty aggressive
Very.
and kind of difficult for a lot of people who are holding these positions. You have people showing up to these meetings who are impassioned about one thing or another, and it's as of late, these meetings have been devolving into shouting matches, insults, cursing, screaming, yelling, unreasonable, inappropriate behavior. I mean, what's What's your take on that? How do you plan to navigate that if it affects you?
So I dealt with many meetings like that as the chair of the school committee. They just, different events happen. You know, we had talked about when we were building the Connors School possibility of redistricting. That brought a house full.
Connors School.
Connors Elementary, which is over by the high school.
Okay.
Which is the newest elementary school.
Yep.
So one of the conversations we had at the beginning was possible redistricting of the city in order to see where we were going to put the school and where the most needs are, and maybe moving some kids because all of our schools are full. So we were talking about that, and that brought a lot of people out because people did not want their district lines to change, or their kids that went to Farwell all the time because they live on this street may now have to go to Longley School. And there was a lot of that and we had rooms full of people that were
I
not
could see people getting
happy.
impassioned about
They were
that.
very impassioned about that. And one of the things I did as the chair, when I spoke to the superintendent, I said, I think we really need to put a process in place and let people understand that we want to hear every single thing that you say. But we're going to be civil. We're not going to scream and shout at each other. We're going to have a time limit on what you can say. There's no talking 2 or 3 times and coming back again, right? Everybody gets the chance to speak. Everybody gets the opportunity to say what they want. And we hear from everybody, but also we need to be civil because there is work to be done. You're on the city council or the school committee to get work done. But you're also available to hear. Open it up. If it's not enough at a meeting like that, make a smaller meeting. Say, we're going to go to this place and we're going to have a smaller meeting and we're going to talk about it more. And we'll make that available for each community, each neighborhood or whatever, if it's a really hot button issue, right?
Yep.
And have the opportunity to really hear what people say. But when you do that, you can't forget that you actually have to go back and hear what they said and do something about it, right? You can have these meetings and hear what everybody says, and then you go back and nobody votes that way or even talks about it when you're sitting there in the horseshoe of Lewiston City Hall, right? That's not going to get us anywhere either, because then people lose any faith in who's been elected. You need to bring those hot topics up. There are hard issues that need to be discussed in our community.
Well, maybe
there are serious issues that need to be discussed.
Some of the hardest and most difficult and most polarizing
right? We have
topics
these aren't necessarily though issues that are exclusively Lewiston.
Of course not.
Issues.
Of course
No,
not.
In any way.
In any
so
way.
in that way, it almost makes it tenable that we can solve these as well.
Absolutely.
You can create some sort of a local a formula that could work on a local level and kind of pass it along and pass it on to other communities or discover from those communities that have a similar issue.
Absolutely.
And how are they tackling it?
If you ever need an enforcer of these rules, I would have to be paid. But I'm physically unimposing. I have a loud voice. I can stand and be like, huh?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Okay.
But if you wanted to pay me, I would consider it.
Let me
We'll keep
ask
it in
you,
mind.
if I can.
This is the Dirty Lou Podcast.
There's a place I go that reminds me of all the things we used to do, where I carved out our names in a special place as a gift from me to you. Ooh, that's where I remember you. Ooh, that's where I remember you. Not a day goes by that I don't think of the time I spent with you. Until I see you again, I will never forget our secret rendezvous. Ooh, that's where I remember you. time between 10 and 2, where I carve out our names in a special place as a gift from me to you. Ooh, that's where I remember 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 you. I can't describe. That's where I remember you. Feelings inside. That's where I remember you. That's where I remember you. That's where I remember you.
City council, I don't know exactly what they make on a yearly level, but it's under 10K at least. Am I right? Like it's closer to half that?
From what I
So-
understand, nobody's doing this for the money.
It's
no,
not for the-
okay.
So city councilors make $250 a month,
Okay.
and they get taxes taken out of it. So that's the stipend
Let me
that
ask
they
you
get.
why.
School
Why?
committee members,
Buy
Why?
groceries once a month.
school committee members make $100 a month. That's
Mm-hmm.
the stipend that they get for being on the school committee. When I was on the school committee, I literally would work 30 to 40 hours
I was going to say
on
you're
what's being done.
you're
Yes.
putting the work in and you're not being compensated realistically, but you realize that and you recognize
You
that.
know that you're going into this. It's not like a lot of other
This isn't
communities in the
money-making.
country. This is not for money. This is because you want to
Are
make
there
a change.
communities where they get involved in that for money? For
Yes.
as an occupation?
Somerville, Massachusetts, their school committee members make $36,000 a year.
Okay. How's that Somerville school
I don't know.
community doing?
I don't know, really, to be honest
I
with
mean,
you.
have we ever thought about the impact of
Some of those
if
things
you
do
do
need to
pay
be looked
people
at.
for a service,
Well, you
then
might
the
get more
accountability
qualified
is
people.
also
I don't
held
know.
within.
Maybe, yes. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I want it broadly across. I'm not asking for bigger government on a city level because you're already playing with numbers.
Yeah.
You're already crunching numbers.
And who's going to pay? I mean, that comes out of the taxpayers' money.
Well, it would,
Right.
but
I personally do not want
in
more
good
money
faith,
out of the taxpayers. I'd rather see us work on
well,
other
let's
things.
cut it out of other areas where it's dead weight.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Possibly.
that's the other approach that you could take on that too. Because if you're going to have individuals who have this desire for affecting community and creating a better community, you would get into a job on a school board level or a city council level to have that type of impact. Would you not?
Yeah.
You're doing it in an altruistic
Right.
way
Yeah.
at the moment. So aren't you limiting the pool of people who are going to be involved in it if
Possibly.
you don't have some sort of?
I agree.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying like it needs to be this 6-figure thing.
Right.
You know,
Well, so I do agree with you. So, and that's one of the things that as a member, so I'm also on the charter review committee where the charter our city charter has to be reviewed every 10 years. And the
we were
mayor-
talking about charter beforehand, getting on the mics. You want to
Yep.
just explain?
So the city
what's that?
charter is the governance of the city of Lewiston. It's like the constitution of the city of Lewiston, right? It's how the city of Lewiston is governed.
Okay.
And it talks specifically about the role of the city administrator, the assistant city administrator, the finance department, the city councilors and school committee members, the planning board members. It discusses all of those different things. When our budget is produced, how it's done, all of this like logistic stuff of that. And there's also, there's a little saying in there about the compensation of elected officials, but it is not written into our charter how much an elected official would get as compensation. That's actually a city ordinance. And a city ordinance is something that the city council puts into effect. So we'll say, I want to suggest that such and such is done, and the whole city council votes in favor of my suggestion. That becomes a city ordinance. The city charter is a set, ruled thing that's governed also by state law. It's kind of
So you
complicated.
guys
a little.
it becomes that issue that people have. Oh, well, they paid themselves this
Correct.
much.
So if the compensation
Gotcha.
is an ordinance, what city councilor sitting on that city council right now is going to say, I think we should get paid more? Kind of looks bad,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
no, it does. Right.
So And that's been the
it's
case
not a
for a
sticking
very long
point.
time.
It just seems like that's part of the flaw of,
I agree.
of
And
getting involvement.
we actually discussed that on the Charter Review Committee, and we made a suggestion to our current city council that they really should look at this and think about possibly upping it and giving a better compensation, because it hasn't changed ever, pretty much.
It could become like the median pay scale of the area of your ward, even, or something like that. There's ways
There's
of
all
keeping
sorts
it where you're not looking like, hey, I just pulled in great money
But it's
from this job, and I didn't want to get too sidetracked in that.
you're doing
With
a
the
job.
importance that it has on a city and local level, and the immediacy of it, I would think that you'd want more candidates or more people who are, and when those who live in that ward are talking to someone like that, they know they have like the full attention.
Right.
That's the part too.
I think we can still find candidates with the full attention without getting compensation.
Yes, absolutely.
Me.
You're proof. You're a living proof
Well,
of that.
I
for
am
sure.
living proof
But
of that.
I think what you have is, you have.
But you're unique.
You have more candidates who are coming out there because they really want. They're
Change.
driven to make a change.
And I think that's a very good thing to have, right? We
Yeah.
want people that want to make change. They want to see this community grow. They want to see it move forward. That's hugely important. I mean, because where are we going, right? I want to see stuff happening in Lewiston. I want to see, apartments that are available. Like if I retire and I want to sell my house, I may not want to live on Horton Street. I may want to live in a nice apartment that I have to pay some pretty decent money for in one of the old mills, right? And then I'm visiting downtown. But I want to also have other things to do, right? Or we need things for our kids to do. There's so much that needs to be done.
I'm living down here on Park Street, and I'll be here probably till at least next summer. And I've been thinking about the immediate local things that David and I can do together down in this neck of the woods. And Kennedy Park was something we did a little over a month ago,
Right.
That night for music. But as far as businesses that would tailor to, or different types of activities that you can do here, the Mainstay Parade did have that after the parade.
We had the
gathering,
bicentennial, yes.
where we
So
got to close down Lisbon Street.
I'm also
Great.
on the Downtown Lewiston Association. So the Downtown Lewiston Association advocates and works for the businesses on Lisbon Street and promoting new businesses and events that are happening down there to build the downtown area again. And I was actively involved in the bicentennial event after the parade, and Trek Across Maine a couple of years ago, and several different events that are happening down there. These are huge things. People love this kind of stuff. The response that we get from everybody is, do this again. Close the street down and have another party again. People want things to do.
They're fun.
And we need to have more of that activity happening. It's really great that we have a Downtown Lewiston Association that's focusing specifically on that. It would be nice if they could work a little closer with the city of Lewiston. So now we're working together to really build that area. And I think that there's some stuff that could happen. You look at many communities across the country, their downtown associations actually have a line item budget on their city budget, because the city is really encouraging and working with this association to make sure that we're bringing new businesses in, we're bringing activities in, we're bringing different things happening right in our downtown and focusing. We have a unique thing down here. For Lewiston, we have a wonderful downtown that we could really build upon with a lot of empty spaces. We just need to find the way to go about and do that. We need some economic development that's going to look at some small businesses that are going to come in. Walmart distribution centers are wonderful things, right? Employ a bunch of people.
Yeah.
But do we have the staff, or do we have the kind of people or the job seekers to fill another Walmart distribution center here in Lewiston? I don't think we do.
That type of work is not for everybody.
And it's not for everybody.
Right.
And really, a Walmart distribution center may be a great thing for a community, but it's not what really makes a community thrive. What makes a community thrive is the little businesses that are here. The Dosty Jewelers, the Simona's Hot Dogs, the Buddy T's restaurants, Ruper's, the businesses that have been here for generations or years. What is the city of Lewiston doing to help them grow and help them become bigger, put a different spot? How about a Forage over at Marketplace Mall
sure.
up on Main Street, right? A second location. right? Can the city work on that in our economic development department? These are the kind of conversations that we need to be happening. We need to start looking outside the box is what we need to do, and not doing what we've been doing all along. Bates Mill is still sitting there. Tom Platz has done amazing things for our community. But when are we going to get something done with Bates Mill number 5, right? It's still not there. Yeah. We need to use the assets we have, promote them, and make sure we have the economic development department that's going to be doing that.
I would really like to see just more done parallel with Lisbon Street and the canal.
Yeah.
I mean, like the canal is just kind of like
another
this,
asset, a diamond in the rough.
Yeah. I saw pictures. It was on some Facebook page about Lewiston. People with their speedboats in the canal back in the 70s.
Yeah, they used to
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
This was a straight up like an outboard engine speedboat, and they were sitting there having water sports. And I remember just being like, that is crazy, but
what if it's all cleaned up and we have access in the winter to skate on the canal?
Ice skating on the canal would be so awesome.
That would be awesome, right?
Yes.
That would be unique. And it's not that far from being attainable.
No, it's not.
Is
That's
liability one of the greatest?
So the city of Lewiston now owns the canal. We bought the canal. So prior to a few years ago, it was owned by like the hydroelectric company that part of the dam and all that. Yep. So it wasn't something that we could do a lot with because we didn't own it, but the city now owns it. What are we going to do with it? Let's do something.
Like a winter festival. All those restaurants and businesses on Lisbon Street could just have a little shack down there along the canal, and we could have ice skating, and
we could do that stuff again.
An ice castle, maybe. You know, like just.
But those are the things we need to be looking at, right? And those are some of the things that we actually see on our budget. So when our budget is discussed on a yearly basis, those things are on there. Like our rec department, that's on the city budget. Right? Activities that happen when the Dempsey Challenge comes. The Dempsey Challenge may ask the city council for $5,000 to help with some of the expenses because we need to have police department down there protecting. We need to have the fire department on call, right? So we may have some overtime. So there is cost involved in these things. And we need to look at that and make sure that we're putting the money where it needs to go. Our rec department. What do our kids have to do in our community? Honestly. We need to grow our rec department. Yeah. We need to make sure that we have a Boys and Girls Club in Auburn, but you know where that Auburn Boys and Girls Club is connected to? It's connected to Portland. Why don't we have a Boys and Girls Club affiliation directly here in the Lewiston, Auburn area? So when funding is raised and the kids raise money, that money comes here. It doesn't go to Portland and for Portland to allocate it here. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Why aren't we looking at those different things that we can make sure that our kids have things to do? You hear conversations in the community, you see it on social media, you see it on some of those pages that have negative things to say about Lewiston, that, we have, gangs of kids, or kids are doing this, or, activities are happening that aren't great. They have nothing to do.
Yeah.
When I had nothing to do when I was 14 years old.
When you were up to no good.
Right? We were up to no good. What else are you supposed to do? We need things for our kids to do. Why aren't we spending more money in that direction? We need to look at those things. We need to look at some of the things, crime in this. Oh my God, I could go on forever. So seriously.
If we're looking at like what we need to do, isn't that going to, in the same way like you became proactive, it's going to take individuals to bring it to.
Absolutely. It's not just going to take a line item budget on the city.
Sure.
Budget,
and
right?
when would the city actually propose, hey, you know what, we want to spend more money like this on no forewarning, no new direction. This is where we want to start spending some money. It has to come from a group of people or individuals to kind of force their hand.
We have those people here in this community.
We do.
Oh my God, we have some amazing people that are already doing volunteering, doing work. What can we do to build up on that? Right? How can we make some of the things that are already happening get even bigger? And how do we encourage people to want to do more in our community? And one of the biggest issues I think we have here in Lewiston is pride. Pride. I think we're lacking pride. And I will take it to even the name of your podcast. Mm-hmm. And no offense, I think this is great with what you're doing. Sure. Right? But this whole dirty Lou thing that people say, it is a derogatory thing.
Born out of a very negative place.
Born out of a very negative place. And I think that, back in the day, we used to have more pride in our neighborhood, more pride of place of where we live. We need to bring that back. We need everybody that lives in Lewiston to say, you know what? I don't give a crap if they call us the Dirty Lou. I'll even call it that as a joke. I know my community is a superstar. It's a diamond, right?
Talk
we
about the
need to
things that
bring
are positive.
Absolutely.
Be vocal and, verbalize why you like living
The reality
here, why you
of
love being
Lewiston is that when we see a tragedy, when we see like what happened a few years ago with all those houses burning on Bartlett Street and fires, this community comes together like there's no tomorrow. This community steps up to the plate and says, we have neighbors that are in trouble and we're going to do something about it. It happens consistently with anything in this community. We have that. We need to bring that in every aspect of our city.
There's
right?
a lot of heart here. Maybe not so much
Absolutely.
confidence that things can change, but a lot of heart. So I think there is growing confidence and growing this wanting to buck the reputation. I mean, the Dirty Lou podcast came about because we wanted to buck the bucket.
And it still bothers some people, though, because people are very,
it should. So do something about it is what we're saying.
Right.
Yes.
And we have to do something about it, right? Because this place
that
is
way
great.
we can laugh about this name, the nickname and all
Yes,
that. We can laugh about it in the
absolutely.
future. But we're not going to do it if we just say, maybe we need a different name. Let's be the new Lou.
Right.
Well, what's that solved? It didn't solve shit.
Right.
Still the same thing. You put a nice little pretty Frozen 2 Band-Aid on it, and you said, let's go to town. Let's keep going.
We also
I
have
don't
to
want that.
recognize that some of the people that say the new Lou or don't want that name are some of the ones that are out there being the most positive about our community.
Sure.
Right?
I understand that.
They really are. And
Sure.
there are a lot of people out there that are really pushing for this better. You hear it sometimes, people are like, oh, you're so kumbaya. Oh, you're going to do another trash pickup and it's just going to get trashy again.
You
So
have
what?
to do these things.
So what? Because
yeah.
it's still a positive change. And the more people you get doing that, the more people you get saying, oh, I think I want to help out. I think I want my street to look that way, right?
Positivity breeds positivity.
Yes.
Negativity breeds negativity.
Bring all of that back. So one of the things I've wanted to do for a long time, and I've never had the real opportunity to really see it come to fruition, but I want to see if we could have some sort of competition in our schools with our kids in their neighborhoods. So kids in a neighborhood pick their streets. The kids get help from the city at the beginning of the year to pick up the trash. They plant plants, they plant flowers. They work on their street is their pride. At the end of the year, each school, there's a competition. Who did the best in their street? The streets that win, those kids get their street block party. Fire department shows up, police department shows up, bouncy house. We got it all because you did this for your neighborhood, and that neighborhood's looking beautiful. You're teaching pride of place to your kids. We're giving them incentive. We're having a fun time. These are the kind of things. Think outside the box. What can we do? How can we bring it around, right?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
And I think we can do that. And those are things that don't cost a lot of money, like really little to no money. It's just, and think about it. The teachers are teaching in school now environmental, right? They're teaching cleanup. They're teaching plants. They're teaching civic duty. It
goes hand in hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what? You 2 years. You took a little bit of a hiatus, right?
I did. So I was on the school committee, and I was actually the chair of the school committee when I came home from work one day, and I found him on the floor and had to rush him to the hospital. And 2 days later, he ended up literally on death's door. He was in ICU for 28 days and in the hospital for 83 days. This was 5 years ago now, he's since had 18 abdominal surgeries and still has many surgeries and many medical issues still to deal with. So at the time, I finished out my term. I did not quit. I could have. That was in March, and there was an election year that year. So that was in March. And then people were taking out papers to run for office for that November and would have been sworn in for January for a new term. And I made the decision at that time that I was going to, instead of run again, because when I do something, I commit 110%. And literally that day that my husband was sick, I had a school board meeting that night. And it was the first time I had ever missed a school board meeting in 5.5 years. I never missed one meeting because it's important to me. And so I decided that it's, for the best interest of both my family and the community. I knew I couldn't give what I needed to give. I decided that I wasn't going to run for the school committee that next year and run for a fourth term. So we took a little time because Steve had to have many, medical procedures, and we've been
Full attention.
I mean, it was full attention.
It's life.
And he started to come back a little bit better. And in 2019, when they were taking out papers again for, the different elected positions in the community, I thought, I think I'm ready. I think I'm going to try to go for city council because I've always wanted to be on the city council. I've always wanted to do whatever I can, as I've stated before, to make our community grow. So I did take out nomination papers, and I actually got the signatures that I needed to get on the ballot for that year. But my husband got severely ill at the end of the summer and ended up in emergency surgery again for an infection that he had from his mesh surgery. He had an abdominal mesh put in, and that mesh failed, and it made him extremely ill. So ill to the point that he could not eat. He had to be on IV nutrition and IV antibiotics on a regular, every day. And
how long did he have to? How long was that? The only way he was being fed.
The only
His
way
body
he was
getting-
fed was by IV nutrition. So he actually had
for years.
It was almost a year that we had to do that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so when that happened, I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to run for city council. There was absolutely, my husband, my family comes first. So I went to City Hall and I decided that I was not going to run for city council that year because I needed to focus on Steve. And in the interim, this is, we've had the COVID years, that was 2 years ago, and everything that's happened, I have made it my duty to stay actively involved, even though I didn't run or get elected to that position. And that is when I became a part of the planning board. I got nominated by the mayor, Kristen Cloutier, to be a member of the planning board, and then I got renominated again when she was no longer in the seat and Mark Kayer became the mayor. He nominated me to be on the planning board, and I have been on the planning board for 2 years. I've also started working with the Downtown Lewiston Association, and in the time for volunteering with them, they asked me to be a member of their board because they felt that I brought a good perspective to them, even though I don't have a business on downtown Lisbon Street, and that I knew a lot of people in the community, and I could probably bring some really good assets to that board. And I have been on there for almost 2 years as well, and it's been a great experience for me. And then I also was asked in the past year to be on the Charter Review Committee by the mayor. And I said absolutely yes, because the city of Lewiston and everything about the politics of Lewiston and the policy has been a passion of mine. So I said absolutely, I would love to be on that. And that has been an amazing experience.
What do you like most about that?
Most about it is just the conversations we're having and seeing what we can possibly change to make things run a little better in our community. We talked about staggered terms instead of 2-year terms, because it's really difficult for somebody to get elected and they get into position in January, they had their inauguration, and then literally like a month and a half later, it's budget season. And if you're new and you're in, it is a difficult transition to have. Mm-hmm. And it takes almost the 2 years of being in office to fully understand all the aspects of being on either the school board or the city council. It's not an easy job. Mm-hmm. So in that time, I have, as I stated earlier, watched every city council meeting and every school committee meeting. And one of the things I've noticed over the past 2 years that I had not seen, I had seen it previously, but these past 2 particular years has been extremely partisan when it comes to politics in the city of Lewiston. And our charter states specifically that anybody that is elected, it is a nonpartisan election. When you go to the ballot to vote for whoever you're going to vote for, whether it's city council or school committee, there is no D or R next to that name. You're running because our charter states specifically, it is nonpartisan. So I have seen over the last 2 years some very, very partisan politics, lines drawn in the sand, arguing happening. When we went through our last budget season this year, name calling of elected officials, there was the respect, the civility. I thought, what is going on in our community? And this really bothered me greatly, because I don't think that that's the way we move our city forward. We don't draw a line in the sand and say, nope, you're not part of my political party, so I'm not going to even listen to you. That's crap, in my opinion. And so I said, I just really want to make a change. I want to go back out there because I know that I am the voice that can speak for everybody. I know that I have friends, whether they're liberal or conservative, whether they're libertarian, it doesn't matter. I can talk to everybody in this community. I have a reputation of being able to do that, and I know that I would be a good voice. I also saw some very difficult meetings between the school committee and the city council over the budget season, where there seemed to be, in my opinion, a disconnect as to what the conversations were happening and why the choices were being made on both. The school committee has the oversight of the whole budget on where the money is spent. But the city council has to vote on the budget to be approved. And there was a lot of arguing and a lot of misinformation, I think, happening. And I think a really important role that we have in our community is the liaison that a city councilor sits on our school committee to be that go-between person to have those conversations between the two elected officials. And I didn't see that happening. When I hear the liaison say, well, you know, if you really had questions, you should have talked to your buddy on the other side, meaning the city councilor or the school committee member should have talked to their buddy in their ward. Right? It's first off, it's not your buddy. Right? This is your cohort. This is this person that's representing the ward with you, whether it's a city council or school committee member. And if there are conversations not happening, then that person that represents the city council on the school committee should be advocating for those meetings and those conversations to have. If you're attending both meetings on a regular basis, you can see where the disconnect is. You should be, and you should have the faith of both your city council and the school board that you're going to be that person that brings that voice to the table on both sides and making sure that those discussions are happening. And I haven't seen that in the last few years. And I really hope that if I do win this position and I do become the city councilor for Ward 1, that my fellow city councilors will support me and nominate me to be the city council representative on the school committee. I had the experience of 6 years being on the school committee. I know the budget, and I know the budget for the city, and I know where we stand just about on everything in this community.
School boards aren't supposed to be partisan either.
No, they're not. And
So-
they are.
and they are.
And we have seen that specifically this year, right? We've seen people bring an agenda to this community because they have a national agenda and not what's best for the city of Lewiston. National politics is one thing, but national politics are not going to make any changes for the city of Lewiston, whether it's Republican or Democrat. What's going to make the changes is the people in this city that live here every day working together to make the needed changes that we have to have.
Of course.
And I see myself as being the person to do that. I have no political agenda here. I have no ambition to be the governor or a state legislator. None of those. I have a profession.
Do you think that's what drives it when there are
I do. I think that people see it
ulterior-
sometimes as a stepping stone to a bigger career and a bigger thing, right? I got these things passed. I'm going to get my name in the paper. I did these things while I was a city councilor or a school board member. So when the next time an election comes up for the state legislator, they're using that, right? I don't need to do that. My reputation speaks for itself. My history speaks for itself. I am for the city of Lewiston and the city of Lewiston only. I have a profession. I have a career. I am a BHP and a ed tech for an early childhood education. That's the direction I want to go in. I do this because I love this city and I have a passion for my community, and I have a passion for policy and public, that kind of stuff. I just love this stuff. Yeah, I just love it.
Right. It
and
shows.
always have.
Yeah, your enthusiasm shows, Linda.
Yeah.
Speaks for itself.
I think it does as well. Just from someone who goes at one point from Portland up to the Lewiston area, having homeschooled prior to, and then deciding that you want to get involved in the public education program when you really kind of didn't need
Nothing.
to.
No,
There was
I didn't
no
need to. No.
So for you to shift and put your energies into a committee, not knowing the likelihood of any progress being made, what was that first year, if I can go back to that, or first time in working with the school board? What was that like?
Difficult. Not going to lie, it was difficult. It was a learning
Were a lot
curve.
of them already in position, already in place
So,
for quite some time prior
When I
to?
got onto the school committee, yes, everybody had been there. Some of them had been there 17 years.
So it had still been partisan before,
Oh,
too.
yeah, there was that there too
There's
as well.
almost never-
And I brought another voice to that committee because as I had said this before, when I used to go, there was nobody. When I became a member of the school board, there was nobody in the audience. I pushed for community involvement. I pushed for people to come to those meetings and for us to hear from them and to understand what is happening. I asked questions that I may even know the answer to questions, but I ask those questions because there are many people in our community that don't know the answers. And whether I know them or not, it's important that we are asking these difficult questions and we are making sure that the community understands what we're talking about and what the process is happening. You know, it's not a behind the scene thing, city council and school committee, even though hardly people watch it.
Right.
It is actually out there for you all to become involved in, and everybody should be involved. And we should be encouraging that. We should be encouraging people not only to watch, to speak, but also to run for offices. I think it's great that we have several people running for different positions. That's the way it should be. That's how we have a healthy community.
Mm-hmm. The city council, Lewiston, this year is going to undergo quite a
Change.
drastic change, is
Yes.
it not?
Yes.
There are 7 councilors.
Yes,
How many are going to be returning?
2.
2. There are 5 open wards.
Yes. And we're also going to be getting a new mayor, and we also have a pretty good turnover on the school committee as well. So,
And on the school committee as well.
yes, so,
Because of, say,
Yes.
perhaps this last couple of years,
Yes.
these last couple of years.
yes, because a lot of people
So we're
are tired of-
deciding, we're going to be deciding the fate of our
Yes.
funding for education and for the city, potentially for 5 individuals, new individuals who
Yes.
might not know, like you talked about, the first
All
2
the
years
logistic-
you're
yes.
acclimating to your new position.
Yes.
So experience,
I don't think that
experience
there-
wouldn't hurt.
No, experience I think is very helpful. I
Uh,
think
probably
experience is
gonna be more
extremely
important
important.
now.
Yes.
And being nonpartisan is also
So
going to
let's
be more,
also
most
recognize
beneficial.
that not only are we having newly elected officials, we are having a new city administrator and an assistant city administrator. We just lost 2 big positions at City Hall. We have
What
interim
positions?
city administrator and the
assistant city-
both resigned this past summer. So right now we have interim people filling in that position. Great people filling in that position, by the way. Heather Hunter, our finance director, is filling in as an interim city administrator. The woman is a genius and amazing to our community. We are lucky to have her. And I think she would, if she chose to run for that position, do a great job. But we still need to hire people to do that job. We need people that understand what this community needs in a position to make those decisions and not just hire anybody off the road, right? I
right.
mean, this is huge. This is the future of our community we're
It
talking
is.
about.
This could
And
greatly
this is
impact
im-
us for the
this
next 5,
is
10, 20
extremely
years.
important, yes. Now, let's also consider that we don't know where COVID's going.
No.
We don't know where we're going as far as finances. This country is starting to see a recession. Are we ready? Are we going to have the right people up there that are going to be able to handle that budget and have those serious conversations? Somebody that may be liberal in their thinking, but darn conservative, and when it comes to spending money, I'm a conservative when it comes to spending money. I'm frugal, I'm French. I grew up that way. When you don't have money, you have 2 pennies to pinch. You make sure that you're spending it where you have it, and you don't spend money that you don't have.
So we talk about, you can see where this is difficult as well, because earlier in our conversation, we're also talking about what are going to be the necessary steps to make our community a much more appealing area as well. We talked about Sunnyside. We talked about the river.
Yep.
We taught, and there are countless other. You could almost go into the 7 wards and find reason to spend money in all
Hundreds
7
of them,
wards.
yes.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
Where do we start? That's a
I
big
mean,
question.
how can we, where we feel like we're actually accomplishing?
And so I
bit
think
by
that that's
bit
what we need to do.
steps?
And I hope that our new mayor, whoever that mayor is going to be one that's going to try to help the city council set goals and say, where are having those conversations? I think there's
Is that the
difficult-
greatest role of the mayor, would you say? Just from the outside looking in?
I think
I'm
that
not
the mayor
quite
had
sure
that with
of
the
the
city
role.
council president. So
I'm
you
sorry?
have, so the mayor really is the voice of the people. right? City council president, because the city council votes on somebody to be their president, sort of their like speaker for the city council.
okay.
They should be the ones that speak for the city council, and the city administrator should be the one that speaks for our staff that works for our city, right? And they should be, in my opinion, 3 of them working together to set our agenda and make sure that we're reaching goals and doing what's needed on every aspect in our community.
That doesn't happen.
It doesn't always happen, no. And I think we need more of that, definitely.
I could see where a mayor who's elected by party affiliation could create not necessarily the kind of harmony you would hope for either,
Right.
though, right?
I think you could have that in many ways, yes.
Probably harmony is one of the last things you'd get if you
Right.
had somebody. put
And
in
where
by a
is that
party.
going to get us, honestly, right? And
How are we
especially
gonna,
in
how
the
are we going to
times
see
that we're
beyond
in.
party
right?
here? How can we do that? Have you ever thought about that?
How do
The
we
best
see
ways?
beyond party?
How do we see beyond party to
I
correct ourselves, to correct our path? Like, and
I
I'm
don't
not
know. I
asking
think that's
you
a very
entirely
difficult.
because I've thought about it
that's difficult.
too.
You know, I think
Sure.
that it's tough because you do have people that run because they have a political party agenda, right? They
Yeah, an
think a
agenda,
certain way,
sure.
and not even just an agenda. That's their beliefs. That's what they believe.
Okay,
They believe
yeah.
that the national, Democratic Party is doing the right thing for our country or whatever it is
Okay,
for a
sure.
party, right?
Yep.
But I think that what we need to focus on and get away from that is people that are really committed to seeing Lewiston grow. Like I've said before, I'm unenrolled. I don't belong to any political party. Somebody even accused me of that being, when you're unenrolled, you're secretly a conservative. And then somebody else told me when you're unenrolled, you're secretly a liberal. And I thought, you know what? That's crazy talk. Why are we thinking this way when actually people are doing it because they just want to see our community grow?
Yeah.
I have children. I have grandchildren. They live here. My mother lives here. I want to see all of us having a great city to live in. I want to go to a restaurant. I want to be able to go to a movie. I want a good job. I want to make sure that I have good roads to drive on, right? My trash is picked up correctly. We have great parks to
Lawns
walk
are mowed.
to. Right? All of these things. And the lawns, that was an example. I really,
No, that came up in conversation
I'm not a
between us
lawn
about
fan.
2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
so
we've talked about this
Have you?
before. Yeah.
I
And we
would-
might be
I would
talking about
prefer
it again.
gardens
we might be
over
talking
lawns.
about it again, apparently. So
lawns are not a big deal for me.
no.
I prefer
It
gardens
was
over
just
that.
it's just one of those things that made me smile
Yeah.
earlier because you're looking to be that liaison between the school
Yes.
committee and the city council.
Yes.
That would be the
And
role
I know that I would
you
do a great
best
job at
serve.
it. I know our staff at our schools. I know our superintendent. But I'm also on the planning board and the charter review committee. I know the staff at City Hall. I know them on a first name basis.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to work with these people. I've had conversations with them already. I'm not going to have to go in there with a learning curve. I'm going in there ready to do the work. Bottom
Linda,
line.
good luck to you in the
Thank
future
you.
here in the coming election.
Thank you.
I know that
Thank you.
Thank you for.
Oh,
thank
and
you
just
for
a
being
little,
part
just
of-
one more little thing. I
Yeah,
heard you were
sure.
doing maybe a ghost story thing. I got a few
You're
ghost
in on
stories.
that?
Oh, I love them. Absolutely.
The other thing, slightly off topic here, but not earlier when you were talking about these opportunities for people to congregate and maybe have conversations like town hall sense.
Yep,
Yeah, that needs to probably occur. That needs to be something.
absolutely.
The thought did cross my mind, and I even wrote it on a chalkboard about this location, about on a weekly basis trying to get people to come on in here and have those conversations.
I think that would be great.
And having people who are willing to not necessarily be the focal point of it, but to be a part of that participation level on a
Absolutely.
week in and week out level. That might be something we could hope
Encourage
for.
people to get out there and talk about what we need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Common spaces.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.